The sun was setting over the city as Officer Richard Davis pulled into the Oakwood Mall parking lot. He'd been on patrol for nearly 10 hours straight, and the weight of the day hung heavy on his shoulders. The police radio crackled with reports of shoplifting incidents across the district, the third such report this week. Budget cuts had left the department understaffed, tempers were flaring in the break room, and Richard hadn't slept well in days. Possible theft at Electronics Plus second floor, the dispatcher announced. Female suspect, dark clothing, carrying shopping bags. Richard's jaw tightened. He'd been dealing with these calls all month, and his patience was wearing thin. Each time they caught someone, two more seemed to take their place. He parked his patrol car in the fire lane, lights flashing, and headed inside with quick, determined steps. The mall was busy for a Tuesday evening. Teenagers huddled around the food court. Couples window-shopped hand in hand, and tired parents chased energetic children. Richard barely noticed any of them as he took the escalator 2 steps at a time, his hand resting on his belt near his handcuffs. At Electronics Plus, he spotted her immediately, a woman in a navy blue blazer and jeans carrying 2 shopping bags. She was examining her phone, standing near the exit. Something about her confident posture rubbed Richard the wrong way. In his exhaustion and frustration, his mind had already made assumptions. "Excuse me, ma'am," he called out, his voice carrying across the store. Other shoppers turned to look. "I need you to stop right there." Tanya Wilson looked up from her new phone, surprised. She'd just spent 40 minutes picking out the perfect case and screen protector after purchasing the latest smartphone model. The store clerk had been helpful, even showing her how to transfer her data while she waited. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked calmly, her professional training kicking in automatically. Tanya had dealt with countless high-pressure situations in her 15 years on the force. As the recently appointed leader of the city's SWAT division, she'd faced armed suspects, hostage situations, and building breaches. But something about being approached in public, while simply shopping, made her stomach tighten. Richard stepped closer, looking her up and down. "We've had reports of shoplifting in this store. Mind if I check your bags?" A young store employee with a name tag reading Chris hurried over. "Officer, there must be some mistake. This lady just bought that phone. I helped her myself." Richard barely glanced at him. "Thank you, but I'll handle this." His attention remained fixed on Tanya, his eyes narrowing. "Those are some expensive items for a quick shopping trip." Tanya took a deep breath, keeping her voice level. "I have receipts for everything, officer. I'm happy to show them to you." She reached slowly toward her purse. "Keep your hands where I can see them," Richard snapped, loud enough that people nearby stopped to watch. A teenager pulled out a phone and began recording. By now, the store manager had approached. A middle-aged woman with glasses and a concerned expression. "Officer, there's been no theft reported from our store today. Ms. Wilson is a regular customer." Richard ignored her. In his mind, the case was already solved. He'd seen too many shoplifters use the same tactics. Act innocent, have an accomplice, pretend to be a witness, create confusion until they could slip away. Not this time. "Empty your bags, please," he demanded. Slowly, Tanya remained composed, though her heart was beating faster. This wasn't the first time she'd been profiled while shopping, but it never got easier. 20 years ago, as a teenager, she'd been followed by security guards in stores just like this one. 10 years ago, as a patrol officer herself, a store clerk had refused to believe she was a cop when she stopped in for coffee in civilian clothes. And now, despite her rank and position, it was happening again. "Officer," she said quietly, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I'm Lieutenant Tanya Wilson with Central Division." A small crowd had gathered. Whispers circulated. Someone muttered, "Here we go again." Richard scoffed. "Right, and I'm the chief of police. Put the bags down now." The store manager tried again. "Officer, I can vouch for her. She showed me her ID when she used her credit card. There's no problem here." "Ma'am, please step back," Richard said, his hand now resting on his holstered weapon. A gesture that wasn't necessary but came from his growing frustration. "This is police business." Tanya carefully set her bags on the floor. Years of training, In crisis management told her that escalation would only make things worse. As a SWAT leader, she taught her team that the most dangerous situations required the clearest heads. "I'm going to reach for my ID," she said clearly, making each movement deliberate. "It's in my wallet, in my purse." Hands on the counter. "Richard," barked, pulling out his handcuffs. "You can explain downtown." The crowd had grown larger, phones recorded from every angle. The store manager looked horrified, and the young clerk seemed frozen in place. What Richard Davis didn't know, what he hadn't bothered to find out, was that he wasn't dealing with a shoplifter. He was attempting to arrest Lieutenant Tanya Wilson, the decorated tactical commander who had just been featured in the department newsletter last month. The same lieutenant who would, ironically, be teaching his upcoming training session on community policing next week. As the handcuffs closed, around her wrists, Tanya kept her eyes forward, her expression controlled. This moment wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who had ever been wrongfully suspected, every assumption made based on appearance rather than facts. And unbeknownst to Officer Davis, it was about to become the teaching moment that would change the entire department. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into Tanya's wrists as Officer Richard Davis tightened them with unnecessary force. The sharp click echoed through the now silent electronics store. Customers stood frozen in place, many with phones raised, capturing every moment of the unfolding scene. "You're making a mistake," Tanya said quietly, maintaining the calm voice she used during hostage negotiations. "My badge is in my purse. If you'd just take a moment to save it for the station." Richard cut her off, gripping her arm as he guided her toward the exit. "I've heard every excuse in the book." The store manager hurried alongside them, still clutching Tanya's receipt. "Officer, please, I can show you the security footage. She paid for everything." Richard ignored her, focused on moving his suspect through the store. His day had been too long, his patience too thin. In his mind, he was simply doing his job, catching a shoplifter who thought she was clever enough to talk her way out of trouble. As they passed the customer service desk, the elderly security guard stepped forward. "Officer Davis, I think you should listen." "Step back, sir," Richard ordered, not breaking stride. Tanya walked with dignity despite the stares and whispers. In her 15 years on the force, she'd dealt with stubborn attitudes like Richard's before. As leader of the tactical response team, she trained officers to avoid exactly this kind of tunnel vision, the dangerous narrowing of perspective that could turn routine situations deadly. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Officer," she tried again, keeping her voice low so only he could hear. "I'm Lieutenant Tanya Wilson. I work out of Central Division. My ID is in my wallet. This is a misunderstanding that we can clear up right now." Richard tightened his grip on her arm. "If you're really a cop, then you know how this works. We do this by the book downtown." They stepped onto the escalator, an awkward descent with Tanya's hands cuffed behind her back. Below, shoppers looked up, pointing and murmuring. A small child asked his mother why the lady was in handcuffs. Tanya felt her cheeks burn despite her professional training. This wasn't just embarrassing, it was humiliating. "My team is expecting me at headquarters in 20 minutes, she said, trying a different approach. "When I don't show up, they'll start making calls." "Good for them," Richard replied, unmoved. At the bottom of the escalator, a mall security officer approached with concern. "Everything all right, officer? We didn't call in any theft reports today." "Police matter," Richard replied curtly. "I need a clear path to the exit." The security officer's eyes met Tanya's, questioning. She gave the slightest shake of her head. Escalating the situation further wouldn't help. She knew the department, protocols better than most. She'd helped revise them last year. The best place to resolve this was at the station, where other officers would recognize her. As Richard marched her through the main concourse, the crowd of onlookers grew. Phones recorded from every angle. Someone called out, "What did she do?" Another voice answered, "Nothing, man. You know how it is." Tanya kept her eyes forward, her posture straight despite the handcuffs. Each step echoed against the polished floor tiles. Memories flashed through her mind. Her academy graduation, her first arrest, the commendation ceremony last month when she'd been formally appointed to lead the SWAT division. None of that mattered right now. In this moment, she wasn't Lieutenant Wilson. She was just another suspect. "My driver's license and police ID are in my wallet," she said as they approached the exit doors. "Just take 30 seconds to look." Richard pushed through the doors into the evening air. "The time for talking was back in the store, ma'am. Now, you're interfering with an officer's duties." In the parking lot, curious shoppers had gathered near the patrol car. Tanya recognized a local news reporter among them, someone who had interviewed her last month about community policing initiatives. The woman's eyes widened in recognition, but Tanya gave a slight headshake. This wasn't how she wanted this. Situation resolved. Richard opened the rear door of his patrol car. "Watch your head," he said, the only hint of proper procedure he'd shown so far. As Tanya ducked into the back seat, she noticed the store manager running across the parking lot, waving the receipt and security footage printouts. Behind her came Chris, the electronics store clerk, and the mall security officer, all trying to intercept them before they left. "Officer, wait," the manager called. "We have proof she paid." Richard closed the door, muffling their protests. Through the window, Tanya could see the confused and angry faces of the witnesses. The mall security officer was now on his phone, likely calling the police department directly. Inside the patrol car, separated by the mesh divider, Tanya took a deep breath. The situation had spiraled beyond reason, but she remained focused. This wasn't just about her anymore. This incident would have repercussions for Richard, for the department, for community relations that were already strained. "Officer Davis," she said, reading his nameplate on the dashboard. "I understand you're doing your job, but in about 15 minutes you're going to realize you've made a serious error. How we handle the next steps will determine what happens to both of us." Richard adjusted his rearview mirror to look at her. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. Something in her tone, in her confident demeanor despite the handcuffs, gave him pause. "We'll see about that," he said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. As the patrol car pulled away from the curb, lights flashing but sirens silent, Tanya glanced back at the growing crowd outside the mall. The store manager was still holding her shopping bags. The news reporter was typing frantically on her phone. Whatever happened next would not stay private for long. The car turned onto the main road, heading toward the police station where Tanya had started her shift that morning, where her office nameplate read Lieutenant Tanya Wilson, Tactical Response Unit, where, in 15 minutes, Officer Richard Davis would learn exactly who he had just arrested. The ride to the police station was tense and silent. Officer Richard Davis kept his eyes on the road, occasionally glancing in the rear-view mirror at his handcuffed suspect. Tanya Wilson sat perfectly still in the back seat, her training in high-pressure situations serving her well. Through the windows, the familiar streets of her city passed by, streets she had patrolled herself years ago as a rookie officer. "Almost there," Richard said, breaking the silence as they turned onto Madison Avenue. "Booking shouldn't take too long if you cooperate." Tanya didn't respond. She had made her case several times already, and Richard had refused to listen. Now she would let the station speak for her. The patrol car pulled into the underground garage of Central Division, the UIA, same garage where Tanya's department SUV was parked in its reserved space. As they drove past the row of vehicles, she noticed her tactical team van. Her team must be preparing for tonight's training exercise. If timing worked out, they would be heading upstairs just as she was being brought in. Richard parked and came around to open the back door. "Let's go," he said, helping her out of the car with one hand firmly gripping her arm. They walked toward the elevator, their footsteps echoing in the concrete structure. Two patrol officers coming off shift stared as they passed, confusion clear on their faces. One of them opened his mouth to speak, but Tanya gave a slight shake of her head. This would play out as it needed to. The elevator ride to the booking floor was brief. When the doors opened, the typical bustle of the station greeted them. Phones ringing, officers filing reports, the constant background noise of a busy police department. For a moment, no one noticed them. Then gradually, conversation stopped. Heads turned. A heavy silence fell across the room. Desk Sergeant Gregory looked up from his computer, a routine greeting dying on his lips as he registered the scene before him. His coffee mug froze halfway to his mouth, then lowered slowly to the desk. "Officer Davis," he said carefully, "what exactly are you doing?" Richard moved forward confidently, one hand still on Tanya's arm. "Bringing in a shoplifting suspect from Oakwood Mall, Sarge. Electronics store theft. Store manager tried to interfere, but—" "Release her," Sergeant Gregory cut him off, standing up. "Release her right now." Richard hesitated, confusion crossing his face. "Sir?" "Those handcuffs," Gregory said slowly, as if explaining to a child, "are on Lieutenant Tanya Wilson, your superior officer, the head of our tactical response unit." The room had gone completely still. Even the phone seemed to have stopped ringing. Every eye was fixed on Richard, whose face had drained of color as the realization began to dawn. "That's not possible," he said, his voice suddenly less certain. "She was—" The station doors burst open and 3 people hurried in. The store manager from Electronics Plus, still clutching receipts, the mall security officer, and a woman in a business suit who Tanya recognized as the mall's director of operations. "We've been trying to reach someone," the store manager said breathlessly. "This officer arrested our customer for no reason. We have the security footage and—" She stopped abruptly, taking in the frozen tableau and the strange tension in the room. At that moment, the side door opened, and Captain Michael Chen walked in, a folder in his hands. He stopped mid-stride, eyes widening as he processed the scene. "Lieutenant Wilson?" he asked, disbelief clear in his voice. "What is going on here?" Before anyone could answer, the elevator doors opened again. 6 officers in tactical gear stepped out, Tanya's SWAT team, ready for their evening training session. They froze in unified shock at the sight of their commander, in handcuffs. Officer Lee, Tanya's second-in-command, stepped forward. "Lieutenant?" His hand instinctively moved toward his belt. "Stand down, Officer Lee," Tanya said calmly, speaking for the first time since entering the station. "Everything's under control." Richard Davis stood paralyzed, his hand still mechanically gripping Tanya's arm. The full weight of his mistake was crashing down around him. His eyes darted from face to face. The captain, the sergeant, the tactical team, all staring at him with expressions ranging from confusion to barely contained anger. I didn't know," he stammered. "She said she was an officer, but I thought—" "Remove the handcuffs, Officer Davis," Captain Chen ordered, his voice dangerously quiet. "Now." Richard fumbled with the keys, his hands suddenly clumsy. The metal cuffs finally opened with a click that seemed to echo in the silent room. Tanya brought her hands forward slowly, rubbing her wrists where the cuffs had dug into her skin. The store manager pushed forward. "So you're really a police officer? I kept telling him you hadn't stolen anything. I even showed him the receipt and the security footage." "Thank you for trying," Tanya said with genuine gratitude. She turned to Captain Chen. "Sir, I'd like a moment to speak with you privately." Chen nodded, his expression grim. "My office. And Officer Davis, you wait right here. Do not move from that spot." As Tanya followed the captain toward his office, murmurs broke out across the room. Her tactical team parted to let her pass, their faces showing a mixture of concern and barely suppressed outrage. Officer Lee fell into step beside her. "Do you want us to delay the training exercise, Lieutenant?" he asked quietly. "No," Tanya replied. "Proceed as scheduled. I'll join you shortly." Inside the captain's office, Chen closed the door and turned, to her concern evident on his face. "Are you all right? What the hell happened?" Tanya took a deep breath, her professional demeanor firmly in place despite the humiliation she'd just endured. "I was at Oakwood Mall, buying a new phone. Officer Davis responded to a call about shoplifting. He refused to check my ID or listen to the store manager. When I tried to identify myself as an officer, he handcuffed me." Chen sank into his chair, rubbing his forehead. This is unbelievable. Did he say anything?" Do anything that indicated why he singled you out? The unspoken question hung in the air between them. They both knew what had happened. It wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. The only thing that matters, sir, Tanya said carefully, is that proper procedure wasn't followed. Officer. Davis made assumptions instead of gathering facts. That's a training issue. Chen studied her face. A training issue, he repeated slowly. Is that how you want to handle this? Outside the office window, they could see Richard Davis standing exactly where they'd left him, staring at the floor while Sergeant Gregory spoke to him in low, intense tones. The store manager was giving her statement to another officer. The mall security guard was showing something on his phone to a detective. Tanya's tactical team had gathered near the elevator, clearly reluctant to leave without her. Sir, Tanya said, her decision made. I think this could be a valuable teaching moment for the entire department. If you'll support me, I'd like to handle this my way. After a moment's consideration, Chen nodded. What do you need from me? First, she said, I need my badge and gun from my office. Then I need 5 minutes with Officer Davis. After that, she glanced through the window at her team waiting by the elevator. After that, we have work to do. News travels fast in a police department. By morning, every officer in the building had heard about what happened at Oakwood Mall. By noon, the story had leaked to the local press. By evening, cell phone videos of Lieutenant Tanya Wilson being led through the mall in handcuffs had gone viral, drawing millions of views and thousands of angry comments. Tanya sat in her office, blinds drawn, reviewing the flood of messages. On her phone, calls from reporters, texts from fellow officers offering support, emails from community leaders demanding meetings. On her desk lay the morning newspaper with the headline, Top SWAT officer handcuffed while shopping, police department. Faces questions. A knock on her door broke her concentration. Come in, she called. Officer Lisa Parker, the department's public information officer, stepped inside, looking harried. Lieutenant, I've got 3 news vans parked outside. The mayor's office has called twice, and social media is exploding. We need to issue a statement. Tanya nodded, having expected this. What's the official response so far? The chief has ordered a full investigation, Lisa replied, checking her notes. Internal Affairs is reviewing Officer Davis's record. They've already found 2 previous complaints about similar incidents. Previous complaints that went nowhere, Tanya said quietly. She wasn't surprised. The system had a way of burying certain issues, filing them away until they were forgotten, or until they erupted into something that couldn't be ignored. Like now. Lisa hesitated before continuing. The department's initial statement called it an unfortunate misunderstanding. People aren't satisfied with that explanation. They're calling it what it was. Racial profiling, Tanya said, the words hanging in the air between them. Yes. Lisa shifted uncomfortably. The chief wants you to make a statement, something that will calm things down. He suggested, emphasizing that it was just one officer's mistake, not a reflection of the department. Tanya stood and walked to the window, lifting one slat of the blinds to peer outside. She could see the news vans Lisa had mentioned, reporters, standing ready with microphones and cameras. Beyond them, a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, some holding hastily made signs. It wasn't just one officer's mistake, she said finally. It was a systemic failure. Officer Davis has been with us for 5 years. In that time, who trained him? Who supervised him? Who reviewed those previous complaints? We're all responsible. Or let the blind fall back into place and turn to face Lisa. Tell the chief I'll make a statement, but it will be my statement, not his. An hour later, Tanya stood before a forest of microphones on the steps of Central Division. Camera flashes popped around her as she adjusted her uniform, the lieutenant's bars gleaming on her collar. Behind her stood Captain Chen and her tactical team, a visible show of support. The crowd had grown larger, now filling the sidewalk and spilling into the street. Yesterday afternoon, she began, her clear voice carrying across the assembled curtain. I was wrongfully detained while shopping at Oakwood Mall. I was handcuffed, publicly humiliated, and brought to this station as a suspected shoplifter. She paused, letting the words sink in. Reporters scribbled notes frantically. I am also a police lieutenant with 15 years of service. I lead the tactical response unit for this department, and yesterday, none of that mattered. I wasn't seen as Lieutenant Wilson. I was seen as a suspect because of the color of my skin. A murmur ran through the crowd. Behind her, she could feel the support of her team, standing tall and straight. I could stand here and tell you this was an isolated incident, one officer's mistake. But that would be dishonest. What happened to me happens to people in our community, every day. The difference is I have a badge and a platform to speak about it. Most victims of profiling don't. In the back of the crowd, she spotted a familiar face, the store manager from Electronics Plus, nodding in agreement. Beside her stood Chris, the young store clerk who had tried to intervene. They had come to support her. Officer Richard Davis has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. But this isn't about one officer. This is about patterns and practices that we need to recognize and change. She took a deep breath before continuing. As law enforcement officers, we have tremendous power. The power to protect, but also the power to hurt. How we use that power defines us. Yesterday, that power was misused. Today, we begin the process of making it right. Reporters shouted questions, but Tanya held up her hand. I'm not finished. This department has work to do. I have proposed to the chief and the police commissioner that we establish a new division focused specifically on community relations and anti-bias training. And I have volunteered to lead it. Surprise registered on several faces in the crowd. This announcement hadn't been leaked. Every officer in this department, including myself, has room to grow. We all have biases we may not recognize, but we can learn to see them, to check them, and to ensure they don't affect how we serve and protect. As she spoke, her phone vibrated in her pocket. She already knew who it would be, community leaders responding to her earlier calls, agreeing to help develop the new training program. I became a police officer to make a difference. Yesterday reminded me that the difference we need most starts right here within our own ranks. In the days that followed, Tanya's press conference became the lead story on national news. Her inbox filled with messages from officers across the country, sharing similar experiences. The video of her arrest passed 10 million views. Politicians called for hearings. Activists demanded reforms. At the department, reactions were mixed. Some officers avoided eye contact in the hallways, uncomfortable with the spotlight now shining on policies they'd never questioned. Others stepped forward, offering support and volunteering for the new training division. Officer Davis remained on leave, his future uncertain. The police commissioner called Tanya to his office 1 week after the incident. Your new division has been approved, he told her, sliding a folder across his desk. Budget, staffing, resources, it's all there. The mayor insisted on fast-tracking this. Tanya opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me, he replied, leaning back in his chair. This isn't a favor, it's necessary. What happened to you, it exposed cracks in our foundation. You're right that it's not about one officer. It's about all of us. As she left his office, Tanya passed a wall of framed photographs, the department's, previous commissioners, a long line of stern faces stretching back decades. She wondered which of them might have experienced something similar, which might have stayed silent for the sake of their careers. Outside, the news vans had finally left, but the impact of what happened remained. Later that afternoon, she would meet with her tactical team, then begin interviewing officers for the new training division. There were curricula to develop, community partnerships to build, and most importantly, minds to change. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from the store manager at Electronics Plus. Saw you on the news. You're doing something important. Let me know if I can help. Tanya smiled slightly as she typed her reply. Sometimes it took a public mistake, a moment of painful truth, to create the opportunity for real change. What happened at the mall had humiliated her, but it had also given her a platform and a purpose. As she walked through the station, officers nodded respectfully. Some still looked away, but others met her eyes with new understanding. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. and for the first time in days, Lieutenant Tanya Wilson felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. 6 months passed. The hallway outside room 305 at the police academy was lined with officers waiting their turn to enter. Inside, Lieutenant Tanya Wilson stood before a classroom of 30 uniformed men and women, a presentation displayed on the screen behind her. "This is where it happened," she said, pointing to a still image from the mall security footage. "This is the moment Officer Davis made his decision." The room was silent as they watched. On screen, a grainy figure in a blue blazer stood near the electronics store counter, a shopping bag in hand. A uniformed officer approached, his body language immediately confrontational. "I want you to notice the officer's stance," Tanya continued. "The hand near the weapon, the immediate escalation. Now watch how the suspect, how I responded." The footage played in slow motion. The officers in the classroom leaned forward, studying every detail. "Today's session isn't about placing blame," Tanya said, pausing the video. "It's about recognizing the split-second decisions we all make on the job, the assumptions that guide those decisions, and how we can do better." In the back row sat Officer Richard Davis. After 3 months of administrative leave and a formal reprimand, he had returned to active duty with specific conditions, including mandatory participation in the new training program. His expression was solemn as he watched himself on the screen. "Officer Davis," Tanya said, her voice even, "would you share your perspective on what was happening at this moment?" The room shifted uncomfortably. This was the part of the training that always created tension, the moment when the officer at the center of the incident had to speak. Some refused, others became defensive. A few broke down. Richard stood slowly. "At that moment," he said, his voice steady but humble, "I wasn't seeing a person. I was seeing a case to solve. I'd already decided what happened before I arrived." Heads nodded around the room. Every officer knew that feeling. The tunnel vision that could take over during a call. "And if you could go back," Tanya asked, "what would you do differently?" Richard took a deep breath. "I'd start by listening. To the store manager. To the suspect. To you, Lieutenant. I'd check ID before making assumptions. I'd remember that my job isn't to make arrests. It's to find the truth." He sat down. The room was quiet for a moment. "Thank you, Officer Davis," Tanya said sincerely. "That's exactly right." She advanced to the next slide. A chart showing departmental statistics on stops, searches, and arrests broken down by race and neighborhood. The numbers told their own story. "These patterns aren't created by any one officer," she explained. "They're the result of thousands of individual decisions, policies that may have unintended consequences and biases we might not even recognize in ourselves." As she spoke, the door at the back of the classroom opened. Chief Thomas walked in, followed by several city officials and community leaders. They took seats along the wall, there to observe the training that had become a model for departments across the state. Tanya continued the session, moving from the specifics of her case to broader principles. Role-playing scenarios, discussion of recent incidents, review of body camera footage. For 3 hours, the officers engaged, sometimes arguing, sometimes agreeing, always thinking critically about their work. When they broke for lunch, Richard approached Tanya as she gathered her materials. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "I wanted to thank you." She looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For not ending my career. You could have. Most people would have." Tanya considered him for a moment. "This was never about punishing one officer, Richard. It was about making all of us better." He nodded. "Still, not everyone would have seen it that way." She closed her laptop. "Next week you'll be back on patrol. How are you feeling about that?" "Nervous," he admitted. "But ready. I've learned a lot these past months." "Good," she said. "Because I'm assigning you to community outreach in the Oak Park neighborhood. You'll be working with Officer Chen. The residents there have requested more officer engagement, particularly with young people." Richard's eyebrows rose. That's a tough assignment." "It is," she agreed. "But I think you're the right officer for it now." You understand something that many don't. As they left the classroom, Tanya noted the group waiting in the hallway for the afternoon session. Store managers from local businesses, including the woman from Electronics Plus who had tried to stop Tanya's arrest. The training now included civilians as well as officers, creating dialogue between the police and the communities they served. That evening, Tanya sat in her office reviewing feedback forms from the day's sessions. A gentle knock interrupted her. Concentration. Captain Chen stood in the doorway. The commissioner wants to see the quarterly numbers, he said, placing a folder on her desk. I think he'll be impressed. Tanya opened the folder. Citizen complaints were down 30%. Unnecessary arrests had decreased by 25%. Community engagement scores had risen across all districts. It's a good start, she said. It's more than that, Chen replied. The program's being adopted by departments in 3 neighboring states. That National Police Association wants you to speak at their conference next month. And he hesitated. Officer Davis's community outreach proposal got approved. Full funding. Tanya smiled slightly. He wrote that. Proposal himself spent weeks on it. People can change, Chen said, leaning against the doorframe. Not all of them, but some. After he left, Tanya stood by the window of her office, looking out at the city as evening fell. Streetlights flickered on. People hurried home from work. Officers on the night shift prepared for their patrols. Her phone buzzed with a text message from the city council member who had become her strongest ally. Just heard your program's going statewide, well done. It hadn't been an easy journey. There had been resistance, backsliding, heated arguments. Some officers resented the training, seeing it as an accusation rather than an opportunity. Others embraced it, recognizing the chance to become better at their jobs. As for Tanya herself, the memory of that day at the mall still brought a flush of anger and humiliation. But it had also given her purpose. What happened to her had happened to countless others who didn't have her rank or resources to create change. Now she was using her position to ensure fewer people would have that experience. 1 year to the day after her wrongful arrest, Lieutenant Tanya Wilson stood on a different stage, the main auditorium at the National Law Enforcement Conference. Before her sat police chiefs, commissioners, and training officers from across the country. A year ago today, she began, I was handcuffed and arrested while shopping for a phone. She told the story they had all heard by now, but with new purpose. Not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as a leader offering solutions. That day could have ended many ways, she continued. With angry press conferences, with lawsuits, with an officer's career destroyed and nothing changed. Instead, we chose a different path. She outlined the program they had built, the community, partnerships, the data tracking, the personal development plans for officers, the measurable results. This isn't just about race, she emphasized. It's about how we see people, all people. It's about remembering that behind every call, every stop, every arrest is a human being with dignity and rights. Our job is to protect those rights, not just enforce the law. In the front row sat Officer Richard Davis, now promoted to Community Liaison Officer. His unit had become a model for the department, with officers embedded in neighborhoods, building relationships instead of just responding to calls. Beside him sat Chris from the electronics store, now a civilian advisor to the police community board. And beyond them, officers from departments around the country, taking notes, asking questions, seeking to bring this approach back to their own cities. As Tanya concluded her presentation, the room rose in a standing ovation. She had transformed a moment of injustice into a movement for change, not through anger or division, but through education, accountability, and a steadfast belief that people and institutions could become better. Outside the conference center, a reporter waited to interview her. Lieutenant Wilson, he called as she exited. Some are calling your program revolutionary. Others say it's just common sense. How do you see it? Tanya considered the question. Neither, she said finally. It's just necessary. What happened to me was a wake-up call. But the real question was always what we'd do after we woke up. She glanced at her watch. Her flight left in 2 hours. Tomorrow she would be back in her classroom at the academy, teaching a new group of officers. The work continued. One mind, one policy, one department at a time. As she walked toward her car, her phone rang. It was the police commissioner. "The mayor just called," he said without preamble. "The city council unanimously approved the budget expansion for your program. You'll be able to train every officer in the department by the end of the year." Tanya smiled. "Thank you, sir. That's excellent news." "No, Lieutenant," he replied. "Thank you. What you've built here, it's changing our department for the better. It's changing all of us." She ended the call and stood for a moment in the sunlight, reflecting on the journey from that day in the mall to this moment. The handcuffs, the humiliation, the anger, all transformed into something positive. Not erased or forgotten, but channeled into lasting change. Some mistakes, Tanya had learned, could become foundations if you built upon them wisely. What mattered wasn't the fall, but how you rose afterward, and who you helped to rise alongside you.